Well, thank you for joining me today. Good morning to everyone. I'm delighted to have members of the General Assembly standing with me because what we're signing today, the Arkansas Works legislation, is the result of an extraordinary effort by a number of key legislators, but it also reflects the best of democracy. It reflects people who disagree on a point, saying that we can come together, we can be practical, and find a practical solution for the state of Arkansas. And to me, that represents the best of our democracy. And if you look at the process in which we got to this point, a legislative task force that was set up that worked hard for a year, led by Representative Collins and Senator Hendren. They held hearings. Everyone was devoted to it. And as I presented some of my ideas, they shot back and said, that won't work. We adjusted it. We made technical corrections in it. And I'll remember when Representative John Michael Gray came in and said, here's some concerns from our Democratic caucus. And he said, here's a list of things we'd like to have changed. Some of those were incorporated. Most of them were incorporated. I said no to a couple. I said more later. And then, we had some of our conservative colleagues that said, if I'm going to support this, we got to have some adjustments. And those adjustments were made. And that is how the legislative process works. And it worked well. And it worked well to the point that yesterday there was a vote in both the House and the Senate, and this morning as well, that reflected not just a majority of Democrats supporting Arkansas Works, but a majority of Republicans supporting Arkansas Works. And that's important. A consensus was arrived at that a bipartisan group of legislators, a majority from both sides, could say, that's a practical solution that works for Arkansas. And if only Washington could learn from that effort. And that's what the people of Arkansas, the people of America are yearning for, where the system works, where you come up with a practical solution. Now, I dare say that my friends here at the podium, if they drafted a perfect legislation, would not look like Arkansas Works. On both sides. We all come up with a different solution. And if we designed Washington, it would be different. We have come up with a practical solution for this time in history for the people that we serve. And I think they all ought to be applauded for that. And so now, let's talk about the future. I'm going to sign this legislation. And we look at the future, there's a fundamental principle of government that we need to deal with. And that is that a minority should not derail the expressed will of the majority. And that has not happened in Arkansas's history. There are tools of minority. They're important tools that can be operated with. But when it comes to a policy that is set by a majority of both parties, and then it comes to the funding of that policy, a minority should not derail the policy. For my Democratic friends up here, I would not want our Democratic members of the legislature to derail a Department of Corrections appropriation because you disagree with the policy. I would not want the Republicans to derail the funding of an agency of government because they disagree with a policy that's been adopted by the majority of the legislatures. And so that's a fundamental debate that we will have coming into the future. My objective in the coming days is to win support for the funding of the Department of Human Services that will include the Arkansas Works legislation that has been adopted. It's my responsibility as governor to avoid what some has described as an inevitable crash. I want, as governor, to avoid that crash. I want to keep the wheels of government on the road and progressing and working for the people of this state. and I am confident that this can be done. My colleagues who opposed Arkansas Works, they did it out of conviction, they did it out of pure motives, and they voted their conscience, and I applaud them for it. And I look forward to working with them to hopefully gain their confidence, their support for the appropriation bill and the funding of this. That is my goal, that's my objective. I'll be happy to sign this legislation with the colleagues around us, and I did want to recognize the great work of Speaker Gillum, who's been a friend throughout all this, a wise counselor, and Senator Dismang as well, President Pro Tem. They sent me a letter before this last session, and they gave me the counsel to let's focus on Arkansas Works. It was wise counsel. We followed that, and I appreciate y'all's friendships and leadership. So with that, let's sign the bill. I haven't done this in a while. All right, you got it there. All right, so Arkansas Work has been signed into law. Thank you all very much. Let's see here. Collins? Thank you, sir. And Senator Manning. All right, let me take a couple questions, and the Speaker and President Dismang might join me up here because there could be some questions that they might want to answer as well. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
You talked about, I know you talked about not wanting minority legislature to derail appropriation policy, but clearly there, based on these votes, it looks like there is a gap. How are you going to close that gap?
Well, first of all, you start with discussion. You start with making the case that this is a bad precedent for the House and the Senate. And then you also have to deal with the reality that they may vote no, and then you look at what needs to be done from that point. I have some level of confidence that people of good faith are going to be able to figure out the right path for Arkansas. And these are all my friends, they're my colleagues. We want to work with them on a lot of different pieces of legislation in the future, so I hope that we can come to a good resolution of it. But I hope you heard my message very clear that I do not believe that we ought to be headed for a crash in this state. We ought to be headed for a consensus. What has happened reflects the best of democracy. Hearty discussion, disagreement, dissent, and you come together to get the job done for the people of Arkansas.
Are you willing to use managed care as a bargaining chip?
I have a lot of tools in my pocket, and but I'm not even sure what you mean by that. Managed care is off the docket right now. It'll come up in a special session, perhaps. So I'm not even sure what you're referencing.
An assurance to senators that are right now voting against Arkansas Works that you would take managed care off the table and maybe consider diamond care in order to win their support?
No. I think people who know how I work understand that I deal pretty straightforward with folks. I make the case on its merits. I try to separate issues. So we're gonna do what we need to do, but and we'll have discussions with legislators. But I think they understand what my parameters are and how I work.
And you mentioned your toolbox. In terms of attempts to get folks to change their mind on the vote, are you looking at making deals that don't necessarily have to do with the policy itself?
I haven't even begun the discussions with the legislators. What I think needs to be done is, first of all, that we recognize that a majority has supported this policy. and that if we fail to approve the funding, then where do we go from there? And that's the beginning point of a conversation. And so we'll have those discussions. And I know these representatives as well, and they're people of conviction, and they're not interested in coming in and swapping votes. They're not interested in coming in and saying how much we can get this or for that. And they're very practical people, and I'm hopeful that we can have a conversation about the merits of this, the policy of it, and what's the right solution.
When you say the state shouldn't be headed for a crash, by crash, do you mean the possibility that the entire Medicaid budget can get voted down?
Well, you've got, under our current interpretation of the Constitution, you have to have a 3/4 vote to pass an appropriation bill. If you have 9 or 10 that would vote against it on the Senate side, then you don't pass your appropriation bill. If that does not pass, then you have to arrive at some consensus for a DHS appropriation bill that will pass. And so the question would be, what can get 3/4 vote? Will the Democrats who have, and the Republicans that have supported Arkansas Works, will they vote for an appropriation bill without Arkansas Works? So you could have a standoff where you have neither side being able to get a DHS appropriation passed because you can't get the 3/4 vote. That's a standoff. And you can also describe it as a potential for a crash. That's what leads to government shutdowns in Washington. We've never had that in Arkansas. I don't expect to have that under my watch. But those are the consequences that are real, and it's real to tens of thousands of people in Arkansas who are dependent upon these services that are at DHS, but also the whole budget of DHS would be at stake. And so some of that's unpredictable. I wish some of my colleagues would tell them what would happen under these circumstances, but either they don't know or they're being very coy and they got their own toolbox. But you know, those are conversations that we'll have.
Are you looking at options for a 2/3 majority or something other than a 3/4 majority, whether there's a legal pathway for that?
I want to win a 3/4 vote. Do you have anything to add? Why don't you all just address some of these questions, I think.
Thanks.
All right. It's been pointed out to me before I give them the microphone that there's less vote required to impeach a governor than it takes to fund an appropriation bill.
No, and I think there was a question about, you know, that the policy that we just passed, you know, there's obviously not 3/4 of both chambers. 71% in the Senate, 70% in the House did approve the policy, but that is not 75%. However, I think you look historically at these votes, the policy votes and the appropriation votes have always not lined up, at least in one chamber. So I think there is some precedent, you know, amongst the members that are not supportive of the policy to in fact, support the appropriation because of, you know, recognizing the difference between the two.
But Senator Michael Lamoureux earlier had talked about the possibility of passing with less than a 3/4 majority. It sounds like would you be willing to say do pass if it's at 70% and we're stuck in a standstill?
Do pass on the appropriation?
Do you buy that legal argument exactly on the appropriation?
No, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit before, but what I'd say is, you know, since I've been here, we've recognized the 3/4 vote requirement. I think that still stands, and that's how we're going to operate as we move forward.
Senator Hendren said yesterday that this appropriation bill would be one of the most consequential in Arkansas history in terms of immediate impact on the state. I wondered if you share that view and if you could speak to that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think it's in the numbers. You know, if we do nothing, if there is not this expansion in place, Arkansas Works is not in place, then it's a $5 billion impact to our state's economy over 5 years. Our annual GDP is $120 million or billion, essentially. That is a significant percentage, you know, for a state of our size. And so I don't think you can underestimate the consequence, you know, to not having that expansion in place.
Mr. Speaker?
I would echo what the governor and President Dismang had said. I think as we look forward on this, the conversations that we're going to have with the members, I think will bear fruit as we move forward. And I have all the confidence in the membership of the House that they're going to deal with this responsibly. They're going to look at the impacts to their districts, and at the end of the day, they'll make the right choice for Arkansas. So, thank you.
Is there a final question?
Some of the opponents have said that they want a up or down vote just on the program itself, not the overall Medicaid appropriation. What do you think about that?
I'd say we had that. That's what we had yesterday with a 70-30 vote in the House and an overwhelming majority in the Senate. So that vote has been taken. We have voted on Arkansas Works, and it was adopted by a majority of both parties, both chambers. Janelle?
I was going to ask about CFCO. There's been a lot of talk about this in the managed care talk. So where does that stand today now that managed care was removed from the bill?
Well, first of all, we're committed to the savings side as well. So we're working internally with DHS to accomplish savings to make sure that our Medicaid budget as a whole is lean but accomplishes a service for the people. In terms of the CFCO, which is really part of the Affordable Care Act, that is actually an entitlement, is the concern about the CFCO, and that it would put our budget at risk. And so that's not a direction that I wanted to go for our state. It does address the disability waiver list, and that's why I suggested a different means of addressing the disability waiver list through the savings plan that I presented that's been off the table now, but we'll come back to it. So we certainly want to address that challenge, but it will be in a different way than CFCO. Thank you all.